Hello everyone, Rob here with precodecamp.com, and in this video we're going to talk a little bit more about, hey, we have a name of list that we would like to display. Let's write some functionality on there. So if we type something into an input field, we kind of get a filter effect based off of the data list that we get. And this example here, if I start typing in Rogers, right, Steve shows up, okay? If I type in Stark, Tony starts showing up. But because I typed in ST, it also thinks that I'm talking about Steve because it has an ST in it as well. So basically, it's just a function that is checking either the first name or the last name, and it's displaying the results here for us. And as we are moving forward with Stark, we see it. And again, I can type in the first name of Bruce, and it shows Banner. And if it doesn't match any results, we just get a generic no results found. So if that's something that interests you on learning, let's go ahead and dive into the code and see how we do it. All right, so we're in the code. I'm utilizing Visual Studio Code. If you don't have Visual Studio Code and you want yours to look like mine, take a look at the description that we have right below this video, and we have a series of playlists for you to kind of go through, and that way you'll understand how to set up your Visual Studio Code to kind of get it looking like mine. The next thing that we're going to do is I need you to create two files on here. The first one being an index.html and an index.js. Both of those can be blank for now. We're going to fill them in, but they do need to be co-located. And that's way whatever code that I'm getting ready to type out, you'll notice that towards the end here, we will link them up, and they have to be co-located if you're going to be following along with me line by line. Again, to get these to kind of show up, all you have to do is hit this little new icon, create the file for index.html, then you're going to hit this button again, and you'll see that you're going to be able to type in index.js. All right. So again, at the bottom of this video, it's all chaptered out for you. So that way you can skip to a chapter if you already know some of this stuff on getting your page all set up. So in Visual Studio Code, you're able to utilize the exclamation mark and hit the tab button, and we get a lot of pre-filled in information. Again, to make this look a little bit nicer, for the title here, we're just going to put search list. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to put in an input field. So I'm going to do input, and I'm going to hit the tab button. And you're going to notice that it auto-filled that tag in for me. It gave it a type of text, which is really nice. What I am going to do on here is I'm going to give it an ID, and that way we can reference this a little bit later inside of the JavaScript. So I'm just going to call this one search field, and I want to give it a placeholder. All right, and then I'm going to type in enter name. Okay, for now we can go ahead and save this, okay? And down here at the very bottom of the Visual Studio Code, you might see something down here called live. And if you do, on the HTML file only, go ahead and click that live button. It's an extension. If you don't see that on there, make sure that you download it. We are utilizing Live Server. And if you right-click your code, you can scroll down to open with Live Server, and that should open up the browser window for you. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the browser just to see what is actually on the screen. So we're back in the code, and inside the JavaScript file is where we're going to be focusing a lot of our attention. We may need to reference the HTML file, but we'll go back to it once we need to do something to it. And in your index file, this is what I would like you to type. Just line number 1, type it in there. And what I always tell students is I don't want you to code out every single thing to solve your problem in the JavaScript file right from the get-go. Let's do the baby steps. Let's make sure we can at least get a console log, because there's nothing more frustrating when you're doing JavaScript and you think that this thing's going to work, and then you go test it out in the browser and you're like, it's not working. Why is it not working? Well, if we just do a simple pause and put a little console log in here and see if we see that in the browser, then we know that the file is linked, and we know that that's not the problem. All right. So whenever you're starting out, this is what I always tell people to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at that browser and see if we can see this in the console. And if we don't, let's fix it. So in the browser over here, I'm not seeing it over in my DevTools. And if you don't have these DevTools pulled up, all you have to do is right-click the file and go down to Inspect, or you hit the F12 button on your keyboard. And either one opens up this, and then you can come up here and click on the console. So I don't see that hello, and that's because we haven't linked the pages quite yet. So let's take a look at how do we link them. So let's head over to the HTML file. And inside Visual Studio Code, we can go ahead and go to the index file, and at the very bottom of our final div, right before that last body, this is where that script has to be. And so if you just type in script, and then you notice that Visual Studio Code is trying to help you out here with some IntelliSense, and we are able to click on this one where it says src. And you're going to notice that there's a little bit of quotes here, and this is an attribute where we can reference the file. And all we have to do is type in index.js. And now if we save this and we go back to the browser, we should see in our console, which we do right here, hello from index.js. And that means that our JavaScript file is now linked to our HTML file, and any kind of error message that we see on follow, we know that they're linked, and that's not going to be the problem. All right. So always practice that whenever you're starting to learn this, because it will save you some headaches later on for sure. All right. So let's go back to the code and see what we have to do here. So I wrote out just some notes here to kind of keep us on task, on target, and we need to write a function that will take a string in as an argument, and it will basically search through our people data array if we have a match. Now we haven't created the people data array yet, so let's go ahead and do that. The thing that I'm going to have us do, and I'm just going to paste it in here, go ahead and pause the video on this. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger for us. That way you can kind of see it. And what I would like you to do is just, again, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can go ahead and type this out. Now, as far as what is this data, well, it's an array. That's why you see the square brackets. And then we have an object in here, and that object has a key of first name, and then it has a value of Tony. And again, we see a comma here, and that means we're moving on to the next array object, and it is going to be a first name of Steve, last name of Rogers. All right, so again, feel free to pause the video and then come right back to this. Okay, so hopefully you got that all written out. The next thing that we need to do is, again, we need to write this function out that's going to take a string as an argument, and we're going to utilize the filter method. It's a higher order method where it takes a function, and it has to return either true or false if it meets that condition. So the way that I'm going to write this out is I'm going to create a simple function, and we're going to call it search people data. It's going to take a single argument in here, and that's called search string, what you see right here. Okay, so that is going to be an argument that we're going to give this function, and imagine later on this is what somebody's going to type into that input field, and we're going to grab that value and pass it to that function. Okay, now this function is going to return something, and what is that going to return? Well, we can take advantage of the filter method, and a filter method can be utilized on an array. And if we take a look at our array of data, it is called people data. Okay, so people data. So the way that this is going to work, I'm going to do people data dot filter. Okay, Now inside here, we can put an arrow function. So that way we know that whatever comes through here, we're going to reference this as a person. Okay? And imagine that we took this array and we just have our blinders on right now, and we're only looking at one array index at a time, and we are calling it person. So if I need to check something on the first name, all right, let's just deal with the first name for right now. I can do that by doing the following. I can say, you know what, let's go ahead and return, and we can do something like this. We can say person dot first name, and then we can utilize the dot includes, because this will check to see if the string that has been supplied is included in that first person's name. So I can do search string. Okay. So let's just test this out here. If I did the following, I'm going to do a console log of search people data, and then I'm going to supply the string of Tony. Okay, and let's see what search people data does for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that, and then let's take a look at it in the browser. Okay, so it came back with one item, which is Tony. Okay, so that's perfect. Okay, because that's exactly what we wanted. But let's go ahead and troubleshoot this just a little bit, because what if I typed this out? Let's go back to the code. What if I did a lowercase Tony? Does it still work? So if I save this and then I run this, right? So let's go ahead and go back to the browser. And I get an empty array. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why did it give me back an empty array? So it gave us an empty array because, let's go back to the code, because this is all lowercase. Like if I put a capital T in there, it matched it perfectly. But what if I did something like this? If I said, you know what? Let's do person.firstname dot to lowercase. And then we can do the dot includes. And then let's also use the to lowercase on this one as well. All right. Let's make that a little bit bigger so you all can see. So now if I save this and then I go ahead and run it, let's go ahead and see what happens there. So let's go back to the browser. And I get Tony Stark again. Okay. And that's because we converted everything to lowercase to begin with. And now it works no matter how I type the Tony in there. Okay. So this works great for the first name, but if I were to come in here and type in Stark, okay, let's do this test. And let's look at it, and I get an empty array, right? And what you want to think to yourself is, why is it doing that? Well, are we comparing anything yet to the last name? And we're not at this point. Okay, so what do we need to do? And I think the best way to kind of code this part out is I'm going to highlight this whole thing again, just to make sure that things are done properly here. And I'm going to do Control X on the keyboard or Command X on Mac, and that way it puts it on the clipboard for us, or you can right click and cut, right? But I want to put a set of parentheses on here first, and then I'm going to paste what was on my clipboard, but then I need an OR statement. So I need the two slashes, or I mean the two parallel bars. Okay, that's our OR statement. And I'm going to just go ahead and paste everything again, because the only thing that changes on here is the last name. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to do last, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that. So now we're checking both possibilities. It's going to check the first name, and it's going to check the last name. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and test this out. If I take a look at this, boom, it works for the last name. We now get Tony Stark, and I believe we were searching for Stark, right? And now it works. Okay. Again, pause the video, test the stuff out to make sure that it works. You can like uppercase the T, uppercase the R, and save it and go back to your browser and test it out to see if it worked. And again, as long as you got back Tony Stark, it works just fine. Okay. So the thing that I want you to get out of this is look at the code here. It's a function. It's taking in a string that somebody, for now, I know that we're hard coding this in, but later on we're going to take what the person has actually typed in and then send it over to this function. Okay. But for now, it is checking the first name, last name, and then the other thing that I want you all to think about is, okay, what type of data am I getting back? And I am getting back an array of names. Okay, that comes back to you, as you can think about it as like a list. So let's go ahead and move on to the next phase of this, which is going to be getting the list to actually display in the browser instead of the console log. That's always like the next step of this part here. So let's go ahead and try that. Okay, so if we're going to no longer utilize this hard-coded value, we need to, in JavaScript, some way capture what that user has been typing in. And so the process that I always try to tell students or to walk them through, right, is let's take a look at our HTML file and let's see if we can identify one of those things, which is what they type in as an input field, right? Let's go take a look at that input field and see if there's a way for us to identify it utilizing the JavaScript. And so the way that we're going to go about this is we have this input field. We only have one input field, but we did give it an ID, and we gave it an ID of search field. And so if we take this, I'm going to go ahead and copy this to my clipboard, and then I'm going to bring it over to our JavaScript file. So let's go over here in the JavaScript file, and I'm going to comment this out here, just a command slash or control slash on the Windows there. And I first will go ahead and create a variable to kind of store that input field into memory. All right, so I'm going to do something like this. I'll say let searched person, and I'm going to set that equal to the document dot query selector, and then inside of the parentheses I need to paste what I copied on my clipboard. And because it is an ID, I'm going to go ahead and scroll up just a little bit here. Because it's an ID, it gets a hashtag. If it was a class, it would get a dot. And so this will go ahead and search the document, and it's going to look through the document. It's going to look, and it's going to say, hey, do I see anything with an ID of search field? Oh, I do. It's going to grab a hold of that for us. Right. And then what we're going to do next is we need to add an event listener to this. And if I take a look here, I wanted to show you this on how to find this event listener. Let's go back to the code here, or to the browser rather, and let's take a look at this. Okay, now this is in the MDN docs, and we have a little snippet here. It says the input event fires when the value of the element has changed. And that works out perfect for what we need to do. And it provides us with code example here where we can just say add event listener, and then we're looking for the input, and then it takes the callback function here, and we're going to be able to do some neat stuff with it with this tiny little event function that we're going to make. So let's go back to the code here and try that out. So now that we captured the search person, again, if you want, feel free to put a console log search person and test that out, see if it worked properly. But for me, I'm going to assume that it worked, assume that it did. And if it did not for you, I would just double check that you spelled it properly. And again, that's why I told you to copy and paste that. Okay. So over here, I'm just going to do the following. I'm going to say searched person dot add event listener, and then in parentheses here, we took the input. That's the event that we're looking for. Is whenever somebody types in there, that's what we want to kind of fire. You know, this function that we're going to type out here next is going to fire every single time somebody types something in there. And in here, we typically put an E or an event. So I'm just going to do E. And then what I'm going to do in here, just to double check my work, I'm going to do a console log of e.target.value. Okay, and I'm just going to save that, and then I'm going to come over to the browser, and we're going to test that out here with it. So if I come over here and I start typing in Stark, you're going to see it show up in my console. So every single keystroke that I type out, you're going to actually see it in the console. So that's what that event is doing. Every time it's detecting a change in this input field, we're firing that event function that we just ended up writing. So so that's pretty cool. So if you see that working, great. That means you got it all done properly. If you don't see it work, that's where I'm going to say you might want to rewind the video and just make sure that that ID matches. Because if we are searching for this right here, if we're searching for the search field, that's where we're hooking onto, and there needs to be an ID out here called search field for this to work. Okay, so again, we're just trying to make things really super simple for you all utilizing this and the JavaScript file. Okay, all right, the index.js. So now that we know that it is firing, then it's time to check our search people data. We're going to utilize the function of search people data and store that result. So let's go ahead and try that. So that's going to be our next step that we do here. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a variable here called search results. And again, I'm going to put this inside of in between the curly brackets here. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up just so that we can see everything. And for now, I can go ahead and just do a console log of search results. And let's just see what that gives us. Okay. So back to the browser. Let's go ahead and type in a person's name, Stark. And as I typed in there, again, it's calling that function every single time we do a keystroke until we get to the end one here, which is Tony Stark. So that's awesome that we're getting this. That's nice. Notice that we started typing in the ST, and again, because Steve and Tony both have an ST in either their first name or the last name, that's why we're seeing this trickle down. And hopefully you're starting to see the picture on when we're utilizing a filter. It's slowly narrowing things down until we get the person that we want. Right? So back to the code. because now we know that we're getting the search results. Now it's finally time to display this information. So let's go back to the code here. And the next thing that I'm going to do here, instead of console logging this, I know that this is good. Again, I'm just going to comment it out for now. I no longer need it. This part here, I'm going to put a comment in here, and because I want you all to remember this, which is we want this to display the search results to the browser. So this next bunch of code here is going to help us with displaying. And if you remember, if we took a look at our index file here, what div did we utilize here that we say, hey, we want to display these results here? Well, it's the search results. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'll copy this down here, and I need to go out there, create a variable, and in this case here, I'm going to call it search result container. So search result container, and I'm going to set that equal to the document.query selector. And again, what did we copy to our clipboard? Well, it is the search results. We need to put that in quotes, but then we also need to add a hashtag to that because it is an ID. It's not a class. Again, classes get the period. These get the hashtag or the pound sign, just like they do in CSS. All right. I'm going to clear out the inner HTML, the HTML that's in the div. And so we'll do that first. We'll do that with, we'll do the following. We'll do search result container dot inner HTML. We're just going to set that to an empty string, meaning that, hey, you know what? Let me see if I misspelled this. There we go. Make that search results container. And then it's going to basically clear it out every single time we type something in there. And that way we can add stuff to it. Okay. So here's where we're going to loop through the array. So we actually want to, for this part here, we want to loop through the search results. Okay. If I can spell search results. Okay. All right. So we want to loop through the search results. And so for that, a simple way for us to do that is going to be a for each. So if I do the following here, if I go ahead and do this, we're going to say, hey, we're going to take that search results array that we got, and we're just going to search through it. And let's go ahead and create an element. And for that, we're going to create an h2 tag. So let's think of this as, hey, in memory, we're going to create an h2 tag. And again, you can name it whatever you wish. I'm going to call it person element. And then the document.create element in memory creates an h2 tag. Next, we need to supply it the content that we would like to have inside of it. And we can do the following. We can say person element.text content equals the person's first name and the last name. Okay. And then the last thing that we need to do is, now that we have this in memory, we need to append this to our div that we just created here, or reference to on line 37. All right. And so what do we want to append to it? Well, we want to apply the person element. Okay. So now that we did that, and pause right here. So that is the lines of code that we added here for the for each. Okay, so let's take a look at the browser now, because I believe that this is the last and final step that we needed to accomplish for this to work. So back in the browser, I'm going to go ahead and type in here Tony, and there I see Tony Stark. If I start typing ST, I see Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. But if I finish up with the ARK or Steve, we notice that our list is now properly filtering. All right. So again, test this out, try it out. Again, if you have any questions or any problems, feel free to reach out to us on this video, right? So with that being said, hope that you got something out of this video. Hopefully it explored a little bit with arrays and objects and a little bit of filter, right? The video was a little bit long, but we did a lot of concepts with it. We put a lot of concepts together with this, all right? So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.